Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network here on a Hot Take Friday. We are presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. You know they are the happy face truck. We absolutely love them. We have a loaded show today. And if our show wasn't so loaded, I probably wouldn't be doing it. I think, I don't know how many of you all have had children or what it may be, but you know that feeling when you get a bunch of people that when they find out you're having a child, they start reaching out and they start telling you things, like they start giving you advice, like maybe advice you didn't ask for, but they give you advice anyways. Like, now when you become a parent, here's something you got to understand. And when you become a parent, here's something you got to learn. And when you become a parent, and so I had a lot of that, but there were a couple of people, and I can't exactly remember who, but there were a couple of people out there that quite frankly gave me advice that I heard, but I didn't totally hear. And it was, when your kid starts going to daycare, your kid's going to start getting sick. It's going to pick up everything they get at the daycare. And then you are going to start getting everything from the daycare. And so for about the last 30 hours, I have been on my ass. I mean, I woke up in the middle of the night just sweating profusely like I had played a game or something. It was so bad. And so I didn't know if I was going to be able to do the show today, but we're so loaded that I was like, you know what? We got to do it. So yesterday, there was a lot of fallout from the Eddie George comments here that we talked about on the program. Again, Eddie George told the Tennessean that the Titans have set themselves back at least a decade, maybe more, with all the firings that they've done over the last couple of years. And so with all the fallout that was coming yesterday from the Eddie George comments, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm going to. When I left the radio, there was a part of me that was like, man, if I start doing my own podcast, am I going to have people pay attention to me the way they paid attention to me when I was on the radio? Well, that Mike Organ story had been out for about 15 hours or so, and nobody had made a big deal about Eddie George's comments. And then I made a big deal about Eddie George's comments on the show, and it started getting picked up by everywhere. And so those are the moments where I'm like, yeah, doesn't matter if you're on the radio or not. If you're worth listening to, people will listen. Regardless, the Eddie George comments yesterday absolutely took off. And there were three reactions. The first reaction was what most people thought, which was, yeah, Amy Adams Strunk has been doing a terrible job as an owner, and Eddie George said it, and he ain't lying. That's how most people felt. Again, Eddie George says that the Titans, set themselves back a decade, and they ain't lying. The second are the people who felt like the comments were taken out of context, or that I, quote unquote, lied about those comments, or what have you. And we'll get to more on that in a second. There weren't a lot of people who thought that, but there were some. So we'll get to more on that in a second. And then the third reaction of the people when it came to Eddie George were of the mindset that, well, I guess Eddie George isn't getting the head coaching job now for the Titans, which I'm not sure Eddie George was getting the head coaching job for the Titans anyways, but I guess now he's not getting it. So let's unpack this. First of all, there is a belief that Eddie George didn't say what most people assume that Eddie George said. As you can see, Buck Rising went on Twitter and he put out the actual quote from the Tennessean, in which Buck said, and we'll get to the full Eddie quote, but Buck says the actual Eddie George quote from Mike Organ's piece in the Tennessean does not directly mention Amy Adams Strunk, though does reference her decision-making. And the quote was, this is from the article, George fears the Titans have put themselves in a hole that continues to get bigger with each firing, which also included Mike Vrabel as coach in 2023 and two general managers over the last 4 years. He believes it has set the franchise back, quote, at least a decade, maybe more. So now there's some belief that Eddie George didn't actually say that. That it's like Eddie George didn't say Amy Adams Strunk set the franchise back at least a decade. Well, who's doing the firing? He didn't say, hey, Amy set them back. He said they've set themselves back. And when you say they is Amy. So the idea that Eddie George didn't say that is absurd. I attributed to Eddie what was said by Eddie. Again, the only thing that I had in the quote, and it's even at the bottom of the screen right now on the stream, is, quote, at least a decade. That's what he said. Now, Eddie didn't say Amy set the organization back 10 years, but to say the Titans have set them back 10 years or set themselves back 10 years is synonymous with Amy because she and Burke Nihill are the only two constants throughout Robinson and Vrabel and Rand and Callahan and Brinker and Borgonzi. So when you say they, you have to be talking about Amy. She's the one making the decisions. If you're saying the firings have set the organization back a decade, you're talking about Amy because Amy is the one doing the firings. So if you're trying to play the Eddie didn't say Amy directly, then you're splitting hairs for the sake of splitting hairs, which I think is kind of bullshit. So don't bring that Eddie George didn't say that to this program because Eddie George did in fact say it. So that was the first thing as far as, I wanted to get off about the fallout from the Eddie comments, which took off as soon as we started talking about him. I actually looked at it on Twitter and I looked at how many people were talking about the Eddie George comments before 2:00 yesterday. And it was basically zero. And then right after 2:00, everybody started talking about the Eddie George comments and it started getting picked up by aggregators. And I got in the car yesterday and Adam Vingan was talking about the Eddie George comments. And I texted Vingan and I said, take thief. But that's okay. Now, there were some people out there that said, well, I guess Eddie George isn't going to get the head coaching job now. And I have to ask, was Eddie George a real candidate for the head coaching job for the Tennessee Titans? Like, did you actually think Eddie George was going to be the head coach of the Titans? He's 3-3 at Bowling Green State. Now, look, just because he's currently at Bowling Green State doesn't mean that he can't eventually be good enough to be an NFL head coach. Urban Meyer was once the coach at Bowling Green State, and not that Urban Meyer was a good NFL coach, but Urban Meyer was a good coach. But there is a gap between first year at Bowling Green, where I'm 3-3 and head coach of the Titans, and everybody knows it. So Eddie George was not qualified to be the head coach of the Titans before he said that the organization, the owner, again, whomever he's saying set themselves back at least a decade, set themselves back a decade. That said, if I were Amy Adams Strunk, and I have actually given a lot of thought to this over the last 24 hours or so, if I were Amy Adams Strunk, and that is a big if because I'm not Amy, but if I were Amy, I think I would interview Eddie George for the head coaching job as soon as Bowling Green season is over. Now, before I hopped on, I took a look at the YouTube chat just because I wanted to see what people were thinking. And Kelsey said, Eddie for head coach based on what? Titanville idiocy would suggest such a thing, but I don't think even Brinker is quite that stupid. And I know Mike Borgonzi is not. Well, I don't think Eddie George should be the head coach of the Titans, but I would interview him. And here's why. Number one, strategically, Eddie George provides you with one of the two external Rooney Rule interviews that you have to complete in order to hire the next head coach. And yes, it's checking a box. And yes, that is the uncomfortable aspect when talking about the Rooney Rule. But that box does have to be checked. And just like when Eddie interviewed with the Bears last season for a job he was never going to get, if I owned the team, I'd want to get those Rooney Rule interviews done as soon as possible. So then I can really hanker down and lock in on who it is that I actually want to hire to coach my team in 2026. Again, and I don't know Arthur Smith that well, but if I just knew I wanted Arthur Smith to coach the team, well, I still have to interview two external minority candidates before I can hire Arthur Smith. Last year, I will never forget, I was at the Predators game when Detroit got beat by Washington in the divisional round of the playoffs, and that game was on Fox. And so the game ends, and they send it back to the crew in the studio with Kurt Menefee and all those guys. And Jay Glazer had a breaking news report that Eddie George was going to be interviewing for the Chicago Bears job. And I'm like, we need to add the context to this, that Eddie George is interviewing for the Chicago Bears job because they're going to hire Ben Johnson, and they need to get external minority candidates out of the way for the Rooney Rule. And so instead of having to schedule an interview, you just fly Eddie up and sit down with him and interview him and say, thank you, Eddie, goodbye. And then Eddie George goes and you hire Ben Johnson. So this would essentially do that for me. Number two, if I was Amy Adams Strunk, I'd interview Eddie George because I'd want everybody to see that even if Eddie George is critical of me as an owner, I can still recognize that this is Eddie fucking George. And Eddie George has earned the right to be critical of me. Again, he's Eddie George. And we live in this society, and a lot of people are like this for some reason, but we live in this society where it's like, well, somebody criticized me, so I hate them. Why? What does Eddie George saying to you or saying to everybody that she set the team back at least a decade, what does that do to you? Does that really change your life at all? I think if you want to run a successful business, you have to be smarter than that. Not that I'm saying Amy is, because I don't think she is, but you need to be if you want to run a successful business. You know, again, I'm sure I'm not high up on the list right now as far as Amy Adams Strunk is concerned. But I really wish she would listen to some of the things that I have to say, because I think some of the things I've had to say over the last couple of years have been very important and could help this franchise not be the shithole of a team that it is right now. So I'd want to show everybody that I can be the bigger person, that I would not let Eddie George's comments hurt my feelings to the point that I would turn myself off on Eddie George, but that it would open me to say, okay, we need to talk with Eddie. Let's hear what Eddie has to say. And I'd want everybody to see that, hey, a little bit of criticism is not the end of the world. And that can trickle on down to the rest of the organization. So I want the fans to know that you're still Eddie George, and you can say whatever you want because you're Eddie George, and we recognize that. So you can be critical of us, you can be critical of our coaches, you can be critical of our draft picks. You don't have to be a cheerleader. By being Eddie George, you earned the right to say whatever you want, and it won't hurt our feelings. Because once again, you're Eddie George. And the third reason, if I was Amy Adams Strunk, that I would interview Eddie George to be the next head coach of the Titans is because I think Eddie George probably does have some ideas that this organization can use. And not just as the head coach does Eddie have ideas of which the coach could use, but I want to know what Eddie actually thinks we need to do as an organization. I mean, again, the next head coach of the Titans is going to do things his way, and I'm fine like that with that. But maybe there are some things that we as an organization need to hear directly from Eddie George. And instead of just the typical shaking hands and kissing baby stuff, I would like to have a sit down. If I'm Amy Adams Strunk and Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, I'd like to have a sit down with Eddie George with an Eddie, tell us what you think we need to do approach. Now, just because Eddie George tells me what he thinks we need to do doesn't mean that that's exactly going to be what I do. But I don't want Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker sitting there, which I think a lot of these first-time general managers do, which is, we've already got an idea what we want to do. Yep, thanks, but no thanks. Yep, okay, we'll see ya. I don't want that. I've worked for people like that get promoted into positions that they're not really qualified for, and they think they know everything, and they're some of the dumbest fuckers you've ever met in your entire life. Now, I've also worked for people that have a lot of experience and don't just pay lip service. And when they sit there with you, like they are clearly listening to what you have to say, regardless of what they actually view you as. I've interviewed for jobs with guys that have been doing this for 20, 30 years. And the amount in which they pay attention compared to the first timers, it's not even close. So I would want Eddie George to sit down if I owned the team. Now, again, I wouldn't have a Chad Brinker and a Mike Borgonzi, but I'd want Eddie sitting down with those guys, and I'd want to be there, and I'd want to make sure those two are paying attention because, again, that's Eddie George. And we don't have to do what Eddie George says, but we need to listen to what Eddie George says. Again, I'm not hiring Eddie George to be the coach of the Titans just because he's the greatest and one of the most recognizable players in the history of the Tennessee Titans. But I do care what he thinks because he's one of the greatest and most recognizable players in Tennessee Titans history. And surely Eddie George has some real suggestions about what we need to do as an organization. So I'd like to hear them. Again, and we'll get into this in a little bit in the next topic. But a lot of these young guys that are just starting out, just becoming head coach, just becoming general manager, just becoming president, a lot of these young guys say, I know how to do it and I don't need to hear from Eddie George in order to do it. And I would argue, would hearing from Eddie George hurt? So I'm just going to say, if I was Amy Adams Strunk, I would interview Eddie George for the head coaching position. How would that make her look? That Eddie George has criticized the organization, and when you criticize the organization, you're criticizing her. And she still says, no, I'm not upset that you criticized the organization or criticized me. I am welcoming you back in because I want to hear from Eddie George. And I've also learned that some of the strongest relationships I have in my own life have been built through conflict. Because it's easy to resent someone or easy to resent something when you don't talk to them about what they said and how it made you feel, or when you internalize what you're upset about, or you bitch to other people about what pissed you off. But some relationships I've had in life, a lot of them have gotten stronger through the conflict. And I think Eddie George saying what he said absolutely has gotten back to Amy Adams Strunk. And this can provide an opportunity for them to strengthen the relationship and maybe use it to help them climb out of the hole that Eddie and everybody else knows they've dug for themselves. So I'll tell you right now, again, I'm not considering Eddie George to be the next head coach of the Titans. But I would interview Eddie George to be the next head coach of the Titans. Michael says it would make her look foolish. There are no reasons to interview a guy with zero chance of getting the job. No point in being stuck in the past. Let me ask you, Michael, did it make the Chicago Bears look foolish to interview Eddie George last year? There are tons of people that get interviewed for these jobs who have absolutely zero chance of getting them. The Titans interviewed David Shaw, the former Stanford coach, to be their head coach the last time they went looking for a coach. They were never, ever going to hire David Shaw. This happens all the time. So don't act like, oh, this is crazy. This is nuts. I'm just saying, when it comes to the Titans and it comes to Eddie George and it comes to what Eddie said, I'd interview him because I would just want people to see that I'm not taking it personally. For whatever that's worth. So that's the first thing. Let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I absolutely love Hiller. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They've been in business since 1990. They are family-owned and operated. With 100% satisfaction, I'm happy you'll be, or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com. They are professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians who come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. Care is their core value, so they believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. They'll take care of the customer on every job, every time. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I know this about Hiller because I use Hiller at my home. They are the best. Proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today. If you want to weigh in on the program, we will hit it over here in the YouTube chat. Okay, topic number 2. So, who watched Thursday night football last night? I did. And who watched the Vikings absolutely get their asses kicked by a Charger team that just got their asses kicked by the Colts 4 days prior? The Vikings now sit at 3-4 on the season, and they have decided to go back to J.J. McCarthy next week in Detroit after J.J. McCarthy was deemed healthy enough to be the emergency quarterback this week. There, in fact, was actually a play where J.J. McCarthy, who was injured with an ankle injury, J.J., who was injured, jumped up like it was nothing when there was a play over there on the sideline. And I think it gives a lot of credence to what Pro Football Doc is saying, that JJ probably could play. So this was a soft benching to go with Carson Wentz. And the truth is, Minnesota stinks. And that should be surprising, right? Because Minnesota didn't stink last year. In fact, Minnesota was really, really good. They were 14-3. And now they've already lost 4 games this year. The best they can do is 13-4. And you know why Minnesota isn't as good as they were last year. They're not as good because they moved on from Sam Darnold. They thought they were the reason that they were good and that Sam Darnold was a passenger on their bus and not the other way around. And it would make sense that they would think that because everybody else thought that. Everybody thought Kevin O'Connell was the reason that Sam Darnold was good last year. And nobody, for whatever reason, seemed to entertain the possibility that maybe Sam Darnold was the reason that Kevin O'Connell was good. And it hit me as we sit here today with the Titans as the worst team in the NFL and the Vikings stinking it up and the Giants of all teams actually have some hope. And even the Sam Darnold haters, like the distinguished gentleman, have to admit, Minnesota made the wrong call. And I asked last night on Twitter if the Cam over Sam crew regretted the vitriol that was sent my way throughout the course of the offseason, knowing that the current Tennessee Titan team could not be worse than they are now, and that Sam Darnold plus the Giant picks would certainly give you a much better chance to compete than the slop the Titans are putting on the field right now. So here's the question I have to ask for everybody, especially the Cam over Sam crew. Can we admit that those of us that thought that Sam Darnold was a total bum were actually wrong? I kept saying during the offseason, I thought Sam Darnold now, at 27, 28 years old, was better than Cam Ward will ever be. And people would, but Jared, he was bad in the playoff game. Yeah, so was Jordan Love against Philadelphia last year. That doesn't make him a bad quarterback. But the problem with this league, especially inexperienced coaches and general managers in this league, is that the unknown is undefeated. And with the inexperienced coaches and the inexperienced general managers, this is a league where I can coach him into Mahomes is the norm, as opposed to, hey, let's go with a guy who we know can win football games in this league. When Andy Reid took over the Kansas City Chiefs, he brought in Alex Smith. You want to know why? Because Andy Reid had the experience and the humility that comes with that experience to know I can't turn E.J. Manuel, the top-rated quarterback in this class, into Tom Brady. I tried that with Kevin Kolb. I'm a pretty good coach. I've coached Brett Favre. I've coached Donovan McNabb. I've coached Michael Vick. I tried that with Kevin Kolb. So I can't take Kevin Kolb and turn him into a Pro Bowler. I can't do it. So I'm not going to take E.J. Manuel. I'm not going to draft Geno Smith with the number 1 pick and try to turn these guys into stars. because I know I can't do it. But Andy Reid had the experience when he made that decision. The fans of teams in the league are obsessed with trying to get the next Joe Burrow with every single pick. But the teams that are winning right now in the NFL aren't necessarily the teams that drafted Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or Lamar Jackson. But the teams that are winning this year are the ones that have Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff as their starting quarterbacks. The best team in the league right now might be the team quarterbacked by Daniel Jones. And that's after that organization did the "we can coach him" thing with Anthony Richardson. Kyle Shanahan, he learned that the hard way too. He got cocky and he tried Trey Lance and he lucked out on Brock Purdy because apparently Mac Jones was the guy he wanted all along. And now he's got Mac Jones. Long story short, Kevin O'Connell is the reigning coach of the year. He's not a moron. He's not a bad coach. He's not a bad guy. But he's learning the hard way what happens in this league when you think you as a coach or you think you as a general manager is the reason that your team is successful and that you don't put into context the quarterback that got you there. And I can promise you, Kyle Shanahan and Kevin O'Connell will never go all in on Trey Lance or J.J. McCarthy again. They will not do it because, again, they've learned the hard way. Which leads me to my single biggest issue with the Titans. The Titans went Cam over Sam. And I have theories as to why. I wonder if money was a factor in this, that Amy didn't want to write the check, but nobody's told me that, so I can't necessarily go off of that. But I almost feel as if they went Cam over Sam because of their inexperience, because of the "I can coach him." Well, the guy who was going to coach Cam Ward, Brian Callahan, who thought Cam Ward was going to be his Joe Burrow, who got up to the podium after they drafted Cam Ward and said, yeah, we were getting offers for the pick, but when there's that kind of quarterback, you don't trade that away. Well, he's already been fired. So he's had to learn the hard way of the "I can coach him" in 2 years, 2 quarterbacks, 2 QBRs under 25. He's already gone. And Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi better figure out how to make Cam look like a legitimate NFL starting quarterback next year, or else they'll be packing their shit up too when it comes to Mount Amy and she erupts. So again, I do wonder if the Cam versus Sam crowd is ready to apologize. The distinguished gentleman. I wonder if they are willing to do that. And I wonder at the same time, if you guys understand what I'm trying to say about the inexperienced coaches and the inexperienced general managers in the NFL and how I think this league so has it wrong. Again, when it comes to general managers, you never see a guy get a second shot anymore. Like I think Trent Baalke might have been the last general manager to get a second shot. And so you never see good general managers, for whatever reason, get a second shot. Joe Douglas drafted a bunch of good players to the Jets. The Jets are a dumpster fire because their owner is a dumbass. Todd Bowles got a second shot. Robert Sala's going to get a second shot. Sam Darnold got a second shot. Geno Smith got a second shot. But I don't know if Joe Douglas will ever get another shot. Because in the league, we always want new guys to be general managers. So instead of hiring guys that have already learned the lessons the hard way, instead of hiring those guys to be general manager, we hire Johnny Jr. in Jacksonville, who trades a motherload of picks to go get Travis Hunter, and then they only play him on one side of the ball. That is the problem. Like, that's the problem with the league. And the distinguished gentleman said, no, we did the right thing drafting Cam. Doesn't look that way now. He says, just wait. Sam Fool's Gold Darnold is what we know he will always will be, and will show his head in the first round like always. When is Cam Ward going to get to the first round? Because right now I would trade to get Cam Ward into the first round. Put Cam on that Seattle team. Yeah, Seattle's so good. They didn't even make the playoffs last year. So if Seattle makes the playoffs this year, to again the Cam over Sam crew, if Seattle makes the playoffs this year, they didn't make the playoffs last year. If they make the playoffs this year, wouldn't you say that's because of Sam Darnold? Same coach. Same coach. Different quarterback. DK Metcalf's not there anymore. Noah Fant's not there anymore. You can't tell me that they're going to make the playoffs this year because of Elijah Arroyo, which might be the only difference other than Sam Darnold. So you lost me with that one. Again, I just want the people out there, because I took so much shit during the offseason from people that were like, oh, Jared, Sam Darnold sucks. Did you see that playoff game? He sucks. I just want those people to say, you know what, Jared? You were right. Sam Darnold doesn't suck. Sam Darnold is a good quarterback. TD texted me a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, Sam Darnold is balling. I'm not going to lie. Because TD was a little, iffy on Sam Darnold. And I'm like, that's all I ask. That's all I ask, is that you say, you know what? Sam Darnold's actually a good quarterback in the NFL. Jared, you were right. That's it. And again, it kills me that they didn't sign Sam Darnold and trade the pick, because if they had signed Sam Darnold, they wouldn't be 1-6. They wouldn't be losing every game by 24 points. Well, put Sam on this team and tell me what it would look like. They wouldn't be 1-6. Put Sam on this team plus the picks you would have gotten from the Giants, and you would have you wouldn't have Femi Oladejo. But that's just me. And again, Darnold's not even making that much money. That's the thing, that Darnold's making like $40 million. Tua makes 53. By the way, the thing that got me going on the whole Darnold thing a couple years ago was, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I watched the Panthers at the end of the 2022 season, and Darnold was great. And me and Gentry Estes actually talked about this as it was happening, about, man, have you seen Sam Darnold? Because he actually looks pretty good. And so I was shocked that nobody wanted to bring in Sam Darnold to be kind of like a 1A or a 1B, kind of like how Indianapolis brought in Daniel Jones. I was surprised that in Atlanta, who had Desmond Ridder at quarterback, didn't bring in Sam Darnold to be the backup in case it doesn't work out with Desmond and then we go to Sam. And so he sat the bench for the whole year in San Francisco, and I actually thought he was going to be better than Brock Purdy, but you're not going to bench Brock Purdy, who just went to the Super Bowl, so got it. So Darnold was the backup in San Francisco. Then he goes to Minnesota, and he starts, and he plays great. So now I felt kind of vindicated, but before that, what led me into the Sam Darnold, like the hill for Sam Darnold, was my theory on paying Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa was up for a contract, and I said, if I was the Dolphins, I would give Tua $20 million a year. And when Tua's agents come back and say, fuck you, $20 million a year, I said, fine, go sign Sam Darnold. And I said, I would be fine doing that because I think Sam Darnold's better than Tua. And people said, you think Sam Darnold's better than Tua? You're an idiot. So, I mean, okay. Like, now it's not even a discussion who's better, Sam Darnold or Tua. Sam Darnold is head and shoulders better than Tua. And I have to say, I always liked Sam Darnold. I did not think Sam Darnold was this good with what he's doing in Seattle right now. Okay. Topic number 3. The game of the weekend around here, at least the game of the weekend around here for me. I have no excitement about the Titans and the Colts on Sunday. I expect the Titans and the Colts to be what the Titans games have been like all year, which is the Titans go out there and they absolutely get their asses kicked. I did a Colts podcast the other day, and the guy who was hosting it was like, so if the Titans, as we preview the game, I might preview the game. We don't do any game previews. This team's so bad, it's not even worth previewing the game. I couldn't care less about the Titans-Colts game on Sunday. I mean, I'll watch it, but I expect the Colts to win the same way everybody else, including the Colts, have beaten the Titans this year. And with no Jeffrey Simmons, I'm not sure the Titans really have a chance, even if they didn't have a chance before Simmons got hurt. The game of the weekend around here is Vanderbilt-Missouri. Because according to ESPN, If Vanderbilt wins, they have a 49% chance of making the college football playoff. Again, that's still technically more likely that they would not make the playoff than they would if they win this game. But 49% is pretty good. Let me ask you this. When's the last time you thought it was 50-50 that Vanderbilt might make the playoff? If they lose, according to the ESPN statistics, Vandy is looking at a 14% chance of making it to the college football playoff. And that's why Vandy, Missouri, in my opinion, is the game of the weekend. Because if Vanderbilt wins this game, then I think they've got a really, really good shot of making the playoff. I have assumed all year Vanderbilt was not going to beat Tennessee. Now, I don't feel as strong about that assumption after watching them both play Alabama than I did after watching Tennessee play Georgia, but the game is in Knoxville, and no matter what, Vanderbilt is always going to have a little brother chip on their shoulder when it comes to Tennessee. And Tennessee is always going to feel like, hey, at the end of the day, we're going to win because we're Tennessee and they're Vanderbilt. And I still am not ready to dismiss that. So I expect Vanderbilt to lose after Thanksgiving at Tennessee. I have counted that game as a loss all year. And if Vanderbilt wins that game, good for them. But let's keep operating under the premise that they will lose on the road at Tennessee. If they win this week against Missouri, all they have to do is beat Kentucky, beat Auburn, and beat Texas. Now, that's easier said than done because, again, this is still the SEC. But Auburn is not good. And Texas is not good. I saw Texas is still ranked. They're number 22 in the country. They just went on the road and had to beat Kentucky in overtime. So I know Vandy will beat Kentucky, especially with that game at home. Vanderbilt should beat Auburn with that game at home. And I still think they should beat Texas. I think with Diego Pavia at quarterback and the way Vanderbilt can score on offense and the way Texas is inept on the offensive side of the football, I think Vanderbilt should go on the road and beat Texas, which, if they beat Missouri this week, would leave only one game left, and that's Tennessee. And a 10-win SEC team is making the playoff, period. So if Vanderbilt beats Missouri, I almost feel like they have the inside track at a playoff spot. Again, it's hard to assume that they'll win all three, Kentucky, Auburn, and Texas, but they probably should. And as far as Missouri is concerned, if they win this game, they've got a real shot at the playoff because they have A&M next week. And again, a 2-loss SEC team, we all know, is going to make it to the college football playoff. So if you are 10-2, there's no way they're going to take a 10-win SEC team and kick them out of the playoffs. And not only that, I think the reason that Bama didn't make it last year over SMU was because Bama lost to Vandy. And so a 9-win team might be able to make it. After they play A&M, Missouri plays Mississippi State, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas. Now, I think Oklahoma is dog shit. I think they're overrated. I don't think they're very good. So I think Missouri should be able to beat Oklahoma, even though that game is on the road. If they beat Vandy and lose to A&M, they still have a really good shot of making the playoff because, again, they're not going to lose Mississippi State and they're not going to lose at Arkansas. So if Missouri wins tomorrow, they probably end the year with 2 losses too. And I have to say, I hate the 12-team playoff because I don't think we need 12 teams to determine who the best team in college football is. I was fine with 4. I really felt like we needed 8. The way I felt when we started the college football playoff, I felt like we needed 8, all Power 5, and this was when the Pac-12 still existed. All 5 Power 5 winners get an AQ, and then 3 at-larges. So Notre Dame, if they're deserving, they get in. Or, the second best team out of the SEC or the second best team out of the Big Ten, or if there's a Cincinnati that belongs, or if that's how I felt. I don't think we need 12. I certainly don't think we need 16, though it does feel like that's the route we're going. And I was very much against playoff expansion, and I still kind of am because I'm not sure we totally need it. But I think this is what ESPN wanted desperately when they expanded the playoff, was regular season games like this, which would have never had this kind of juice in 2012 when only the top 2 teams made it, really mattered. And I'll be blunt. I haven't watched really a second of Missouri football this year. I know they played Bama close. I was in a wedding that day, so I didn't watch the game. But I absolutely think there's a chance Missouri is one of the 12 best teams in the country. So as far as what I'm excited about this weekend, and I will be en route to Toronto tomorrow because we are going to go to game 2 of the World Series. So I will, I think I'll be watching this on the Air Canada flight. But as far as the Vandy, Missouri game is concerned, I am freaking excited because I think that the winner has a real shot at making the playoff, has the inside track at making it to the college football playoff. So as far as what's exciting this weekend, to me, it's not another Titans drubbing. Again, I'm going to watch the game on Sunday. I just found out earlier today that the game is at 3:25. I thought the game was at noon. Why are the Titans playing a late game against the Colts? That shows you how little I have been paying attention outside of just kind of the nitty-gritty of the Titans on a day. I didn't even know the game was an afternoon game. I thought it was a noon kickoff. So that's what's exciting to me. Not another Titan drubbing, but it's whether Vandy can actually make the college football playoff or not. As far as the, hey, it's little old Vandy and little old Vandy's getting college game day and Kenny Chesney's going to perform. I don't care about that. You might, I don't. I'm over that. I am in to the actual, I'm excited and in to the actual, can Vanderbilt make the playoff? And if Vanderbilt can make the playoff, how far could Vanderbilt possibly go if Vanderbilt makes the playoffs? So that, to me, this is the game of the weekend, Vanderbilt, Missouri. And I've got no feeling one way or another. Last week, I said, I look at the LSU helmet and I look at the Vandy helmet, and I just don't feel like those two belong. And when they played, and we even had Caroline on the show, and we talked to Caroline about this, it wasn't an ass kicking like a 41-14 kind of ass kicking. Vanderbilt only beat LSU by 7. But as far as the play of the game, Vanderbilt kicked that ass on Saturday against LSU. And I just didn't see that coming. So I am incredibly excited about this. This is something I've always wanted. I have always wanted Vandy to matter because I felt like in Nashville that could really be something if Vanderbilt had a good football team. Now, before we get to our picks, I have to get to this just because it drives me so crazy with some of the commentary that I have heard over the last 24 hours regarding this NBA story, which just gets wilder and crazier by the day. So yesterday morning, I think everybody woke up to that freaking crazy story about the gambling as far as Terry Rozier and how he checked out of the game with a foot injury, and Chauncey Billups and how he was running these high stakes underground poker tournaments with the mafia, which I thought was all kind of screwed up. And so I, like everybody else, was kind of shocked when this all came down. But the fallout, the reaction to this, I actually have found to be very disappointing. And I'll explain. So when I used to work with Floyd and gambling became a thing, Floyd was very, very skeptical. And what I mean by that was, as far as endorsements were concerned, I was sitting there endorsing FanDuel. at the time, talking about, hey, hit the parlay, blah, 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 blah. And he told our bosses at 1025, do not sell me on any of the gambling. Because the way he was taught for 40 years in the NFL was gambling, bad. Don't get involved with gambling. Don't even think about gambling for a second. And we had talked towards the end of the Jared and the GM program about doing a daily segment where we went over gambling and betting odds and things like that. And, could we sell that to a gambling company, to a FanDuel, to a DraftKings, to a BetMGM, to a TwinSpire, to whomever? And Floyd looked at me and he's like, the only reason I don't necessarily want to do this is because, people can get crazy and they can get all worked up and they can say whatever they want. And I don't want someone showing up to my house saying, you told me that Pittsburgh was going to win and they lost. Boom, they shoot them. And so, again, the way that it used to be was gambling, bad. But once gambling became legal and everybody started embracing it, all of a sudden the leagues started to get in bed with the gambling companies. And you would see the gambling ads on the scoreboard during the games, hey, and this is the FanDuel parlay presented by FanDuel. Use the promo code FanDuel at checkout and I think there were a lot of people that are like, oh my God, look at how the league has embraced gambling, because for years, gambling was a no-no for the league. Right. And for years, gambling was illegal outside of Vegas and Atlantic City. Well, it's not anymore. It's legal. For years, college athletes that were getting paid under the table had to hide it. Now it's, look at how much NIL money I've gotten. The rules have changed. And that's okay. Like, that is reality. So what happened with these leagues was they found out, okay, well, we're not going to be able to stop this. The Supreme Court has ruled sports gambling is legal. So people are going to make it legal. We're not going to be able to stop it. So let's get our cut too. And that's why you see FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM ads everywhere. And so when something like this happens, again, a bad actor or two bad actors out of a league of hundreds, we all of a sudden have these people that get all high and mighty and they say things like, this is what happens when the league gets in bed with the gambling companies. As if point shaving had never happened before. When I was in college at Louisville in 2011, we played in the Sweet 16 of women's basketball. They brought the guy from Arizona State at the Sweet 16. We were in Spokane, Washington. And they brought that guy from Arizona State that got caught up in the point shaving controversy and he had gone to jail. And he came in the locker room and spoke to the team about his experience and how it's not worth it to point shave and throw games and things like that. He said it actually started out over video games. He and somebody else were betting on video games, and then it just escalated to, hey, man, if you keep this to 6 points, we'll make $20,000. Okay. Well, gambling was illegal then, but I guess they still did it. Go back to Henry Hill. And I sent out a tweet last night, and I was really referencing the fallout or the reaction to the gambling story with all the people that want to talk about how the leagues are culpable or the gambling companies are culpable or the legality of gambling is culpable in why we're having a couple of bad actors shave points or trade inside information. And I think it's absurd. I sent out a tweet. I said, there are so many people in this country. I am amazed at how many people there are in this country where a high school education is free that do not know anything about history. And not just U.S. history, but really any kind of history. But especially U.S. history. They don't know anything about history. And it amazes me. Like, are some of you people not curious at all about why things are the way they are? So when I see people get up in arms and they say things like, oh, this is what happens when you allow gambling to be legal, is some nobody Scarbini is going to go out and fake a foot injury in a regular season game, and he's going to hit all the unders, and you've ruined the integrity of the game. May I remind you that over 100 years ago, 8 guys allegedly on the Chicago White Sox through the World Series. Like, again, the gambling things that we're noticing where guys are getting pulled out for point shaving or stat shaving or over-under totaling, or in baseball with the let's bet whether or not it's going to be a strike or a ball and the guy throws it to the backstop. Those are such minor details that these legal sports books are picking up on, and they see it right away. And they say, hey, there's a shitload of money that's come in on Terry Rozier under assists. Why is that happening? That they figure it out immediately. I mean, again, I remember when that pitcher for the Guardians got caught for, I guess it was if he threw a ball, there was some bet, and they showed like the pitch that he threw, and he just spiked it 10 feet short of the plate. Yeah, that guy probably was throwing that pitch. It used to be that we had the World Series being thrown. So the legality of gambling has nothing to do with bad actors doing bad things. So when I see people say things like, oh my God, the gambling, it's all the gambling's fault, I'm like, it's been this way for years. This is nothing new. Get off your high horse. The other thing that I find to be incredibly fascinating by this is, am I the only person that has seemed to notice that all of the gambling scandals, for the most part, at least in my lifetime, when it comes to pro sports, have been around the NBA? Am I the only person that's noticed that? I know, again, baseball had that issue with a couple of pitchers that were betting, this will be a ball here or whatever. And the biggest stories when it comes to gambling, the Black Sox scandal, Pete Rose, those things were involving with baseball. But again, in my lifetime, the biggest can you believe it moments in which games have essentially been thrown or doctored for the sake of betting odds always involved the NBA. Whether it was the Tim Donaghy scandal, whether it was the Jonte Porter scandal, or now Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups and this latest scandal. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is a problem in the NBA and not so much other sports. The reason I think it's a problem in the NBA is because in the NBA, the players don't really care about the regular season games. One of the accusations against Chauncey Billups is that Chauncey Billups had given inside information to somebody that on a March 24th game of 2023, that, hey, we're tanking, so we're not going to play any of our good players. We're trying to lose. They just don't care. The regular season in the NBA does not matter. Terry Rozier says to his people or the mafia or whomever it may be, Terry Rozier looks at them and he basically says, yeah, I'm going to fake an injury in this game so that we can all hit our parlays with our unders on my stats. You would never see that in an NFL game because the NFL games are too important. No NFL player is going to say, yeah, I'm going to fake a hamstring injury so we can hit all the unders in our betting on our parlays, because that NFL player knows that if I fake this injury, I'm going to get cut next year, and it would not be worth it. Nobody in hockey would fake an injury like this, because if you were to fake an injury in the NHL and you were to go out, oh yeah, my foot's bothering me, I can't play, so that all the unders or whatever hit, the rest of your team, who now has to double shift because you faked an injury, would run you out of the room. Only in the NBA. where Terry Rozier apparently does not care that, yeah, I'm going to take this game off. Where guys load manage during the regular season. LeBron James takes off games. The NBA has a problem that the NBA is kind of admitting, but they won't. And that is that the majority of their regular season is completely useless. It is completely useless. I mean, again, there were times where they're trying to incentivize guys playing hard in the regular season by introducing the Commissioner's Cup, the play-in tournament. And then they've got on top of it, they've got, in order to get the max contract or to win the award, you have to play X amount of games. These guys don't care. Kawhi Leonard never plays. And he's getting all his money from the Clippers on some side deal. Again, allegedly. The NBA's got a real problem about the lack of their games mattering. And the fact that a guy in Terry Rozier can sit there and say, I'm going to fuck this game up and I'm going to pretend that I have a foot injury so that all of my buddies can make $200,000 while I'm making, what was it? He's made like $100 million in his life. I've made $100 million and I'm going to shows you how unimportant the regular season of the NBA is. So enough with the fake outrage. Again, that feigning of, the gambling. Oh, this is what happens when we legalize gambling. Enough with that. There's always been gambling. There's always going to be gambling. The truth is, when you regulate things, they are much safer. It's a lot easier to be accountable when it is legal because you can go to the authorities when somebody is cheating the system. I use prostitution as the example here, right? I said this when Robert Kraft got busted. I said, I think prostitution should be legal. And people were like, but Jared, look, to me, do whatever you want to do. You know, if you want to pay for sex, knock yourselves out. I don't pay for sex, but if you want to, go ahead, knock yourself out. That's your business. But with prostitution being illegal, it's not going to make prostitution go away. But if prostitution was legal, then when you would go to a brothel, you would know that the workers at the brothel are, how do I say this? Clean. Whereas when it's not, and you go to a brothel that is under the radar, how can you be sure that these workers are, again, clean? That's why I think regulation's important. Same with marijuana. You know, again, you're buying it on the street corner, there could be something in it. Buy it from a store, it's probably safe. So enough with the fake outrage about the gambling. Gambling is fine. There are always going to be bad actors and everything. And so this is just an incident of that. The Chauncey Billups stuff is nuts. Again, I'm trying to figure out this cheating at the poker, like why you would get involved with the mafia. Why would somebody who played in the NBA for 15 years and is coached for 5 years, why would he get involved with the mafia? I still don't understand that. And apparently they were using one of the Kardashians' penthouse in order to have these modern day executive games. So with that, as we talk gambling, it's time to get to our pick segment. By the way, a couple of you have mentioned L'Jarius Sneed in the chat. I got nothing to say about that. When it comes to L'Jarius Sneed, I told you guys he was hurt. They said he wasn't. You said he wasn't. You told me, Jared, let Rand cook. And I've seen all I need to see about L'Jarius Sneed. So without further ado, it is time for our pick segment for 6-pack picks on the week. Last week was not our best, but it was not our worst. This, I think, is the third week in a row in which we finished exactly 500, 3-3 last week. I picked against Vanderbilt. That one hurt me, but I just couldn't pick. I couldn't pick Vandy to beat LSU. And then I picked the Titans to win in a Mike Vrabel special, and they did not. So 3-3 last week, and we are 21-21 on the season. So we either need to get the Chauncey Billups glasses or we need to start winning some games, one or the other. We start, of course, in college football with what I consider to be the game of the week, at least around here. Vanderbilt and Missouri, 2:30 ESPN on Saturday. Vanderbilt is actually a 3.5-point favorite in this game. And for the second week in a row, I am going to pick against Vandy. I will go Missouri 28-24. It's like I'm anticipating that what goes up will come down. I think Vanderbilt can win. I don't know if Vanderbilt should win, but I don't think Vanderbilt will win. I'll go Missouri 28-24. Okay, game number 2, the night game. And this one was kind of tricky. A&M, number 3 in the country. They're on the road at number 20 LSU. 6:30 ABC. A&M is a 2.5-point favorite. And I think one of two things is going to happen in this game. Either LSU is going to push back after the loss to Vanderbilt and Garrett Nussmeier crying on the sidelines and all of that, or it's going to completely fall apart and the Brian Kelly getting his ass out of there train is going to start picking up some serious speed. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think LSU is going to get their asses kicked. I'll go A&M 35-21. A&M covers the 2.5. Not a great slate as far as the NFL is concerned. And I think a lot of this is because there's so many national windows now, but also a lot of teams are on their buys. So our first game in the NFL, San Francisco at Houston, noon on Fox. Houston is a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to go San Francisco. I think San Francisco will cover the 2.5, plus I think they'll win outright. Number 1, Mac Jones and Kyle Shanahan, I think, is a great marriage. I think what's going to be tough to deal with is the fact that Mac Jones, I think if you just sat Kyle Shanahan down and said Brock or Mac, he would pick Mac. But he's going to be stuck with Brock because of the contract and because Brock has been their starter and they've gone to a Super Bowl. But I think Mac's going to get another win. And Houston's a mess. And they're a mess on offense. And so Robert Saleh versus the Houston mess on offense. I'll take San Francisco. 2017, they'll cover the plus 2.5. This is a fascinating game. Cleveland at New England, noon on Fox. Cleveland has no quarterback, so I don't know how Cleveland would score enough points to win. But New England is a 7.5-point favorite. And everybody is drinking the Kool-Aid when it comes to Vrabel and I almost said Mac Jones, Drake May. Everybody is drinking the Kool-Aid in New England, and I'm not knocking it. But I cannot get over the performance that Mike Vrabel had against Jim Schwartz in 2023. When they singled up Andre Dillard with Myles Garrett at the end of the half. And Cleveland's defense is very good. So I'm going to take Cleveland plus 7.5. I'll go New England 10, Cleveland 3. I'm going to take Cleveland plus the 7.5 because I think Cleveland's defense will keep it close. So, again, New England's going to win because Cleveland can't, they don't have quarterback. But I think their defense is going to keep it closer than 7.5. Sunday Night Football. And boy, do we have a good one for SNF. Aaron Rodgers versus the Green Bay Packers, 720 NBC. Green Bay actually favored by 2.5. I'm taking the Steelers. I think home field matters in Pittsburgh. I think that Aaron is going to play energized. I think Arthur is the right coach to kind of maintain Aaron's energy. And I think that Tomlin is the right guy for a game plan against Green Bay. I also think Arthur knows a thing or two about what Matt LaFleur is going to want to do with Jordan Love. And I think Pittsburgh is sneaky good. And I think Green Bay, there's just something missing there. So I'll go Pittsburgh 24-16. They will cover the 2.5. They will win outright. Aaron Rodgers wins the grudge match between he and Green Bay. And it really is a shame that Pittsburgh's going to be wearing those heinously awful uniforms. And it's too bad the game's not at Lambeau Field, but it's not like that was a choice that was made. So I can't be upset about it, but I'll take Pittsburgh to win. And I am excited. I don't know about you guys. This one does excite me at least a little bit. And as we always end the show on a Hot Take Friday, 6-pack picks, the Titans are 14.5-point dogs at Indianapolis. And I think that number is so big because, as my dad has always said, those are called fuck you numbers, where they make them so big that it's like, well, Indy's not going to win by 14.5. And I think Indy is going to win by 14.5. I think this is going to be like every other Titan game has been all year, which is the Titans throw a couple of punches in the first half. It's somewhat of a close game going into halftime. And then it is a prime your eyeballs out in the second half, the way pretty much every week has been this year. I'll go Indy 34, Tennessee 13. I'll take the Colts. And I think the Colts win big. Hit the like and subscribe. Do it. You know you want to. We love you. Thank you all so much. Once again, here, Stillman and Company. I will be in Toronto this weekend, but we should have our traditional post-game live like we normally do on Sunday after the Titans and the Colts. Like and subscribe. And again, hit those notifications so that you can get it wherever you are, whenever you are, for Stillman and Company, wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody. And we'll see you all after the game on Sunday.